wants the recording of this event, it will be there for you. And if you want to share with any of your coaches that mightn't be able to join in tonight, then it's there for you to do so. Sorry, I'm just looking at a few bits and pieces coming through here as well at the same time. Apologies for any I suppose, miscommunication that was sent out there with the little invite that was sent. I know that there was, I think probably everybody got an invite and didn't got a cancellation. So I'll have that corrected for tomorrow's event. Apologies about that. That was my error, but I'll have it corrected for tomorrow. So all the events will be going ahead. There won't be any bother there. We'll keep going with these events. So thank you all for joining in again tonight. And as I said already, tonight we're going to speak about building player resilience. So over the last few weeks, we would have spoke about the nursery, the coaching officer, and we would have saw the lads speak about conditioning J player last week and leading into tomorrow night. Those particular events, they were very much factful. The information was laid out in terms of maybe A to Z in terms of how you might perform a particular task and carry it out. This is different in the environment that we're trying to create tonight, I suppose, as we go through this. It's different because, as I mentioned at the start, we want to pose more questions and have answers at the end of this, and have the coaches leave this particular event questioning themselves and having an idea of where they might be going as we get back into action with our players. So I might just ask Jason to lead on from there, and we'll just go through the outcomes and we'll continue on. Passing over between Donie and myself as we proceed through the night. So the outcomes for the event tonight. So by the end of the session, we will hopefully be able to explain the Taurus principles. Donie will look at those. We'll define, identify and measure resilience in players, list ways to build resilience using practical examples, and then at the very, very end, we'll describe what is a rocky road to success. Okay. So they're the outcomes for tonight. We'll present through. I'll ask you to move on. So again, please, Jason. At this stage, I'll pass you over to Donie Brennan, and Donie will say hello and take up the Taurus principles and describe and discuss what they're all about. Donie. Are you with us there, Donie?
I can. Can you hear me there?
You can hear you now, Donie, yeah?
Yeah. No, first of all, just before we get into the Taurus, just to explain, I suppose, tonight about, I suppose, every time we go to a Moore Park or we go to Crow Park, resilience is a huge thing, and the teams that have a lot of resilience and are able to respond to adversity and are very committed and very hungry and passionate about the game and the way they play are ultimately the ones that are successful. So we're just going to try and go tonight and show how resilience, you can implement resilience through your sessions and through your players the whole way up through the pathway from nursery, 7s, 9s, 11s, and implementing it at different age appropriate things that you'll be looking for more commitment the farther we go up. And I suppose tonight, as I say at every workshop that we attend, if we take one thing out of tonight, it's a huge success that we're going to implement into our sessions as we go along. One thing would be huge gain that you can implement as you go on, and it's going to help you and your team develop as a coach. So anyone that would have attended the tours workshops knows what the principles are. So we're going to relate them back to how we can build resilience in. So if we can just put them up there, Jason. So what we're saying there is the testing and challenging. All players should be challenged. So when you're doing this, are all your players committed and being resilient in their commitment? Are they passion hungry, driving for the ball? Are they blocking? Understands the player is at the center of the game? Are they blaming others, or are they taking ownership for what they can do? Resembles the game and it's games based during your coaching and things you can look out for. Are your players and are you controlling the controllables, or are they worried about how you're refereeing it? All players involved all the time. Are they open to change? Are they following your instructions? And it's little things like that you need to check. Should always be enjoyable, developmentally appropriate, and a holistic GA experience. So again, everybody needs to enjoy the game while also trying to build all of the above. Okay, Jason? Can you hear me there, Mike?
We can, Donie, yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. So we're just going to do a thing there. What is resilience? And as Mike said early on there again, we can open this up, and if you want to speak, you can speak away or you can just comment in the comment box. So just for everybody there, how can a player show resilience? So again, as we have up there, please type in the comment box, or if you want to turn on your mic, feel free to do so. So what would you be looking for in a player as regards resilience? So feel free to either type into the comment box or turn on your mic. We'll give you a minute there just to do that.
We just have one question there, Donie. So what age group are we talking about? So ultimately what we're talking about is the age group that you're working with right now. This particular presentation, again, it's based around your experiences in the age group that you're working at. So we're catering from under 13 all the way up to and including adults. So you can consider the age group that you're working with, the theory that we are going to discuss and the practical examples that we're going to discuss that could be relevant to any age group. So whatever age group that you're working with at the moment. So there's a few things coming through there, so Donie. So keep trying even when the match is gone. Never give up regardless of the score. Keep going and give 100% no matter what's happening in the game. Wanting to improve and get better from both games and training. Okay, thank you all very much for those comments.
Yeah, and I suppose very, very relevant. And the big thing I suppose that we're looking for there is for the coaches to try and instill these things into the players while they're training and while they're playing. But there's going to be loads of matches when they're going to be being beaten and they're going to be winning. So it's how they're responding, how they're keeping going. How are they showing leadership? Are they looking for the ball, as David was saying? So you have to encourage that and try and build it into your session plans as well. Commitment to training, if it's not in training, it won't be in a match. So even the way they train, are they very committed? Are they just going through the motions?
Yeah, perseverance, willing to reflect and learn. I think that's a very important one as well. And again, it's something that that particular thing is reflected as we move through the presentation. For younger kids, it's how they react when things aren't going great, be it losing possession or losing on the scoreboard. Yeah, and I think that's a hugely important point. And again, it's an area that as we move through the presentation, again, it's another particular area that we'll discuss. And again, I'd say at this point, you will see it as we go through tonight. Share your experiences. If you do want to come on the microphone and share, then please do so. Maintain a perspective and to focus on the positives, very, very important, I suppose, especially, again, if you go back to the last point, if things aren't going so well, if you're losing possession in a game or if you're losing on the scoreboard, it's hugely important and there is a perspective and there's a focus on the positives. And ultimately, that comes from the coach. That comes from the coach and it will lead down through into the players. As players develop into adults, no doubt that will change for them and that have their own understandings and their own perspective on things. But I think it's hugely, hugely important that the coach is the leader in that area. Okay, so thank you all very much for that. Just before we move on into the nitty gritty of things, just a few little
forward. Not in forward. And not those people. So big listen to it.
Okay. So first of all, just where does the word resilience come from? So it comes from Latin, which means to bounce back, being able to recover from difficult situations. Okay. So again, I think that's probably self-explanatory there in itself. And then a little definition there. The American Psychological Association defines resilience as a process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or even significant sources of stress. Okay. So we're going to look at those in more detail as well and look at those words and those sort of phrases as we delve deeper into the presentation. Okay, thank you, Jason. Again, you can keep your comments coming through as we go through the presentation. Okay, so just to look at a little bit more detail in terms of what is resilience. Okay, so just a couple of little words here, a couple of little buzzwords that we're going to discuss, and again, just try and put examples around them in terms of how they be relevant to you and they be relevant to your players. You can see there, I suppose, that that little plant in the center is being resilient in the fact that it's not growing its natural habitat. It's had to fight its way through a crack in the ground. And very often in life, I suppose, not only in sport, people have to be willing to fight their way through and until things work out. So what is resilience? So is it adaptability? So what do we mean by adaptability? So we're talking about our players from, again, this can apply to underage players all the way through to adult players. Are they adaptable in terms of change in position on the field? Are they adaptable in terms of being able to cope with a different game plan that might not suit their game exactly, but are they adaptable and will they fall into place in terms of what is the best for the team? Are the players adaptable in terms of when they go to secondary school, when they go to college? Are they able to adapt to those particular environments and at the same time be able to perform on the pitch when they may come home at weekends or whatever the scenario may be? Can they adapt perhaps to court or to training by themselves if they have to go away, if they have to move away from work, or if they go away to school or whatever the scenario is? Can they keep themselves up to scratch in terms of their training? So are they adaptable to different situations, both within the game, during the game, and outside of that game? Have they got the coping skills? So have they got the coping skills to cope with a situation like we might have seen here earlier through a few of our comments? If possession in the game is being spilled and your team is losing possession continuously, are the players, are particular individuals able to cope with that and be resilient in the fact that they're going to keep trying no matter what the scenario is? Have they got the coping skills to adapt and to cope with that? Have they got, even if you want to relate it back to the world outside of the game itself, have they got the coping skills to be able to go away to college, to be able to fend for themselves, to cook for themselves, clean for themselves, and to be able to actually continue on their own lives and moving away out of the nest, as you might say? So have they got the coping skills, again, both on the field, and have they got the coping skills when they move outside of that? Welcome challenges, setbacks provide opportunity for growth. So this is probably a difficult one, I suppose. It's a difficult one for everybody. But again, I think that the environment that the players would exist in is very, very important here. And then as individuals, I think there is a good opportunity for them to be able to take setbacks as an opportunity. So if a game is lost, for argument's sake, can that particular player, isolated individual player, can they go away? Can they reflect on their own performance? Can they come back, train harder during the week leading into the next game? Or will they see that as, oh, look, I'm not able to play. I think I might just drift away now, look, and leave the other lads at it. I'm not good enough to play. I'm not good enough to play. I might be a bit of junior down the road. But what kind of resilience do they have? Are they willing to welcome that challenge and again, to take those setbacks as an opportunity? The strength of the team is the strength of the team is the players, and the strength of the players is the team. For me, I think with any group of players, I think a core group of players is hugely, hugely important. I think no matter what the situation is, be it from, again, under 13 right through to adults, ordinarily what you would see is that there's going to be natural leaders within the group. I think that's hugely, hugely important, that you do have a group of 4 or 5 players that do show resilience, that if things are not going as well as they potentially could for the team, that they're the players that will try even harder, that at half time they'll offer a word of encouragement rather than maybe being upset about the fact that the game is not going their way. And it is a case, and it even comes down to individual level, that at half time the game's not going away and the player comes off and perhaps they're a bit aggressive about the fact that the game is not going in their favour. Perhaps they expected more of themselves in that particular game. And what's the knock-on effect to the rest of the group, and how does that affect the rest of the resilience of the rest of the group? So I think a core group of people within any group is hugely, hugely important as a leadership group. And perhaps as a coach, you need to potentially identify who that group may be and speak to them about the different areas in terms of, okay, you might feel that the team aren't so well if they're a couple of points down, and they need to be mentally stronger to fight their way back rather than falling out of the game completely, or whatever the scenario may be. So what is resilience? Strength is a product of struggle. ability to admit to struggles. Again, probably a difficult one, I suppose, especially for maybe underage players. In preparation for this, when I was considering things, I think one of the things that may existed 15, not even 12, 15 years ago, certainly when I would have started out coaching under 16 in my own club, was maybe 23, 24. Every night after training, I dropped the majority of that team home, maybe do a couple of rounds, but that wouldn't happen now. But during that time, it gave me an opportunity, I suppose. I gave the players an opportunity to speak more openly about what was going on in their lives, be it school or even when I came down to meeting girls or whatever it was. Like, they were 16, so obviously they were starting off to live their life in that way. And it gave me the opportunity, I suppose, as their coach and as potentially what I'd like to think as a mentor, to be able to speak to them about to give them examples of what had got on in my life and how I might have dealt with that, or how I might have dealt with it differently. So,
I do a thing there for board, and of course it has to be for club.
So the strength is a product of struggle, ability to admit to struggle. So I think it's hugely important if we can find a way of engaging with the young players or adults, no matter what they are, and being able to have a conversation with those people and find out exactly what is going on in their lives, and then try and offer advice, or very, very simply only just to sit and listen. So at underage level now, that's difficult, and I suppose young people are ultimately not going to come out in front of a group and speak openly about what might be going on in their schoolwork or in their lives in general, or what it might be going on at home and what might be bothering them. So I think maybe trying to find alternative ways of doing that and engaging with the people, I think it's hugely important, and the experiences and I think the experiences and the know-how perhaps that a coach may have, obviously, over a young player would be very, very powerful if you could engage with the people that way and try and build a resilience in them, just to reassure them that things will be okay as we move through life. Okay, so you might move to the next slide. So please, Jason. Okay, so I'm going to pass you back over to Donie here at this stage. So you might come in again. So please, Donie. Are you with us, Donie?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what to expect in the resilience in a player and what we're actually looking for. So Jason, if you can put up there what to expect. And there's another one there, Jason.
Is Jason still with us? He is. Thank you, Jason. Okay.
Yeah, so the behaviours as well. So if everybody can just take 20 or 30 seconds just to quickly flick through what they are. And this is what we're looking for in resilient players and why we were trying to get players resilient. I suppose what to expect, commitment terms, when we're dealing with youngsters, I suppose, is we're looking for their attendance. We're looking for, are they buying into what you tell them? Are they listening to you? Are they giving up? Are they driving all the time? I suppose as we get older and older, the commitment will change a small bit, as we expect people there nearly 99% of the time. Are they letting you know when they're not available to attend training? Just one club player I would have played with, I know a long time ago, he was best man at a wedding, and the wedding was in Donegal, and we had a championship match on the Saturday. We were training on the Thursday night. I think the lights were only after coming into O'Moore Park at the time, and we were allowed to train only on the Thursday night under the lights before the match on the Saturday. It was the semi-final. And his best friend, he was actually best man at the wedding, so he went to the wedding in Donegal on the Thursday, and he came home for training on the Thursday night for the championship match on the Saturday. Like, that definitely was huge commitment and resilience, and I suppose it sort of inspired everybody else as well at the same time to the level of commitment that he was prepared to give. What to expect, the quality practice. I suppose when I was underage and juvenile, no matter what time I went to training at, Michael John Tierney was all who was there before me. You couldn't beat him. So no matter what time I arrived at, he'd be there practicing frees, practicing his technique, striking the ball. He could hit 150 frees before training would ever start at all. And I suppose it counted then every time he went to a match. He had his little ritual. He had his in his head what he was going to do, and he wouldn't let himself down. Like, if he wouldn't let the team down, he'd always be coming up trumps. And it was just purely practice, and a ritual and a little his technique, and he never failed. So I suppose the quality of practice, even during training, like, are they going through the motions? Are they committed? All the time, you need to be striving for the best. Their behaviours, I suppose everyone alluded to there, that not giving up during matches. Like that's a given, you know. Open to change. Again, our adult senior football team there with the club last year, Paul MacDonald would have played for Laois and won the Leinster Senior Medal playing half back in 03, won an All-Ireland minor medal in 97. He played outfield all his life. Never played a match in the goal. And our goalie was suspended for a match last year in the championship, and our sub-goalie was injured. And being open to change at 41 years of age, I think Paul, I hope he's not listening tonight, he went into the goals and played in the goals, and there wasn't a bother on it. And look, he was open to change for that. I think a big one in resilience is every player has strengths and weaknesses. And I suppose if the coach can get the player to understand their strength and understand their weakness, so when they get a strength, that what's their weakness, what do they need to do next, and to strive on that, and the player is willing to listen and work with the coach. The coach needs to be in constant communication. Remember, we had a player on our club team, he was a great man, catch a kick out. But when he'd get the ball, he wouldn't be that strong. His weakness was his delivery of the kick pass. So every time he'd get the ball, he'd be looking for somebody to come and hand him off the ball. So the player would even tell you every time he won the ball, come to me as fast as you can and I'll hand you off the ball. You know, it's a huge strength to have, to actually know your weakness and what you need to work on and how you can overcome your weakness. Okay?
Okay, so Jason. Okay, so next of all, folks, I'd just like to talk about how we could potentially measure resilience in players, okay? Again, I'm going to speak, I suppose, about this is ultimately again from under 13 through to adult level. What I would say before I get into the detail of what we're going to discuss is that perhaps at under 13, 15 and before minor, perhaps maybe you'd potentially look at things, I suppose, in an overall scheme of things with the group rather than looking at individuals. As you go in maybe from minor and obviously into adult games, then you could start looking more at the individual. So what we're going to look at next is just one example of a little platform or a framework that you could potentially use as a coach and as a player, okay, minor, senior perhaps, in terms of how you might gauge and decide on where the player is strong and where the player perhaps needs work, okay. So I have a couple of different variations of this particular little framework, which I'll email out tomorrow, so you can have a look through those. They're on Excel, and you can perhaps decide yourself if you're going to carry one forward into next season and use it with your players. Again, at under 13 and 15, yes, I don't think it's any harm in the world using it from the coach's perspective. And if you are to engage with the players, I would potentially be picking a couple of little scenarios where you can work with the group rather than just focusing on the individual. Okay, so what this particular little table is telling us, okay, it's basically a SWOT analysis for the coach and the player. It's a player profiling. What's very, very important, I suppose, is that as coaches, that if we go through this particular process here, that we do relate it back to the pitch, be that in the group context or in an individual context, okay? So the particular graph itself, on the left-hand side, it just gives you a list of words or terms that can be categorized for the player or for the athlete. The next particular box, okay, the API. So the athlete's perception level of importance, okay, or the athlete's perceived level of performance. That's for the coach, okay. So the coach in that particular instance can mark the player based on what they perceive them to be. So their confidence. The coach here in this instance has given the player a 10 for confidence. Okay. The next particular column is for the player themselves. So the athlete's self-assessment. So when this was released out to the player, this particular player, X, considered that their confidence was 8 out of 10. Okay. The next part is just a way of working out the discrepancies and working out areas of focus. So where you might look at first of all and work your way through the list. What it says very simply is that you take the athlete's assessment, okay? You minus that from the coach's perspective. Sorry, it's 10 minus the athlete's perspective. So 10 minus 8 is equal to 2, and then you multiply that by the coach's perspective, which is 10. So that gives you 20, okay? You can see then as you work your way down along, refocusing after error seems to be the biggest discrepancy. So the coach is on the sideline during the game, okay? He's looking at the game, he's looking at the training sessions, and after that player loses possession, the coach thinks that he's a 9 out of 10 in terms of being able to flick the switch and focus on to go retrieve the ball or to be ready to receive the next ball when it comes his way. However, that's not the full picture. It seems the player themselves, they've said that they're after an error, whether that be lose possession or give away a free or whatever the scenario is, kick a wide, whatever the scenario may be, they feel that they're struggling to refocus. So there's a conversation to be had there, no doubt, between the player and the coach to try and figure out why that is the scenario. Okay, if it is a situation, okay, where the coach is potentially not able to answer those questions, maybe there's an opportunity there to reach out to other people, have the conversation with other people, and to try and figure out why and what can be done to help that player to recover faster after they make an error. Okay, so that's just one little example, as I say, and I do have maybe 3 or 4 more other documents that basically do the same thing. They're more detailed than that, and are broken down into different segments, and underneath each segment there's different protocol that you can measure. Again, for minor, for senior, I think that you could definitely give this a go with your players. Under 13, under 15, perhaps look at it, break it down and look at it as more of a group context, okay? Still, it's a good little measuring tool. It's a good way for you as the coach to first of all to see what your perception of the players are, and then obviously for the players themselves, and to find that understanding between the coach and the player. So again, you will have more of those tomorrow. Okay, so you might be, I think at this stage, so Jason, I think we need to swap over, don't we?
Yeah, I'll unshare my screen there now, Mike, okay?
Yeah, okay. So at this stage, folks, I'd just like to show a little video. It's probably apt at the moment that we're showing this video. Michael Jordan is involved. If any of you that are watching the Netflix series that's out at the moment, it's very, very good. And it just shows, within that, it just shows, I suppose, the resilience that Michael Jordan had as he worked his way through his career. And it wasn't just all plain sailing for him, as we would have seen in that series. I presume a lot of people would have watched it. If not, I definitely recommend a look. It's very, very good. So, Jason or Donie, so at this point you might just prompt to say that you can hear and see, okay? Are we good there? Did you hear sound?
Yeah.
Very good.
I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I've failed over and over and over again in my life. And that is why I succeed.
Okay, I'll pass it back. I'll listen share there. So again, Jason. So what we can see there, I suppose, just within that short clip, is that even Michael Jordan, and again, we just seen from that particular program on Netflix that like he was idolized there in the late 80s, early 90s. Like he was the Ronaldo of the day, but still in all, he had to persevere especially as he grew up in his early career. In terms of the training that he'd done, how he applied himself to his training, how he applied himself to looking after himself, to be able to train and perform at the highest level. So, but still in all, even during that particular time when everything was going well for him in a high pressure situation in those big games, I suppose there were still shots that he would have missed. So it's an ongoing process really in terms of a player and their ability to be resilient, and the guidance and the help that they need to become resilient from the coaches. Okay, so Donie.
Yeah, I suppose the big one with Michael Jordan there as well. He was learning from his mistakes and what he was doing wrong, and he was bringing it into the next day. So building resilience scenario one, we're going to give you a scenario here now, two scenarios, one followed by another of two juvenile things. And I suppose the main thing is to be honest here and what would you do? There's no right and wrong answer to this either. But what would you do in this situation? And you can either open up your mic or you can post again into the comment box and we'll go from there. So scenario one. Just one thing as well before we go any further, I want to say everything that we do here is both relevant to football and hurling, so it doesn't matter. Everything is can be relayed back to both hurling and football. So scenario one, your star player is instructed to go into full forward in under 14 county semi-final. He shouts back to the sideline and refuses to obey the instruction. What do you as the coach do? Now again, we're looking for you to either post into the comment box or turn on your mic. And again, as we're saying here, there's no right and wrong answer, really. We'll give you a couple of minutes there again to reply.
Okay, your coverage isn't great, Donie. We can still hear you, no doubt, but it is a bit fuzzy. So hopefully it'll kick back in there within the next few minutes. So just to reiterate Donie's point again, just repeat what Donie was saying, that again, if you do have a scenario, if you do have a particular experience that's like this, or even another scenario that might have come into your head off the back of reading this, if you do feel that you'd like to share, then please open up your mic and share with us. Or in turn, as Donie had mentioned already, if you do want to type into the comment box in terms of what you might do as a coach in that particular scenario. Perhaps it might be easier to discuss this. There might be a lot of typing to do. So again, we'll give it 30 seconds, and at that stage, then we'll reach back to Donie if everybody is happy to do so. Okay, we have one in there to substitute him, okay? Okay, thank you for all your responses. So, honestly, calling to the sideline, reiterate the call, and that this is what the team needs. If no joy, put the player in who would play for the team, okay? Yeah, when you get a chance, run into him and have a quiet word for him, one-to-one, to do as he has asked. Call him over to the line quickly, explain reasons for the move. I'd want to talk to him one-on-one rather than get into a shouting match. Yeah. Okay. And thank you all very much for the comments. I'll read out a few more and we'll pass it back to Donie again. Call him over for a private chat to explain why you're making the move, but let him know that if he doesn't agree, you'd have to stop him. Possibly take off the player, ask him to show team spirit. Okay, very good. Important that no person or player is bigger than the team. Okay. Explain the move before you shout. Okay. Okay. Thank you all very much for that. It's excellent engagement. Thank you all very much. And I think a lot of those answers, Donie's now going to pick it up and give his opinion on it. And I think what you'll hear Donie repeat is some of the comments that have been made there already. So again, thank you all very much for that. There is one more scenario to come, and we'll ask for the same interaction again. So thank you, Donie. I'll put it back to you for the moment.
Yeah, definitely. Can you hear me a bit better there, Mike?
Yes, clearer now, Donie.
Yeah. No, so look at, I suppose what I would do in that situation, I would definitely, we would have to all know our players as well. And was this completely out of character for the player to do? I would have to take into consideration. If it was completely out of character, I would probably have to go in, have a word with the player, explain to him what the situation was. If he was obeying the order, then fair enough, he could go on. If he wasn't willing to do it, I suppose he would have to be substituted in that instance. If it was probably a reoccurrence and you had this situation with the player already that he wasn't listening to instruction, I would feel that you would have no option but to substitute him. I suppose the one thing I would like to state as well, it wouldn't matter to me if he was the star player or if he was a sub only after going on. I think that's more important to take into account as well, to treat everybody the same. The one thing then that I would look for in the resilience, I looked up on resilience, and the most important thing in resilience is that after, so say if you had an elastic band and you stretched the band, after you release that elastic band, it would go back to normal. So that would be a very good way of gauging the resilience in that player as well. So after you had the conversation with him, did he do what you told him? Did he play for the team? Did he obey the instruction? You know, the other thing I would think, no matter what would happen there, I think it would be very important to address that situation with the whole group after the game also, to make sure that there wasn't a reoccurrence of that, and that it wasn't acceptable, and give the player maybe a chance maybe to talk to the players or apologise, or if it was a reoccurrence again, I would probably just take him straight away.
Yeah,
okay.
Sorry, Donie. Okay, so just a couple of more comments there before we move on to the next scenario. And again, thank you all very much for those. I'd ask again if similar response, sub goes in. Okay. Don't forget that the coach must show resilience also. I think that's a hugely important point to make. And again, as we move through the presentation, we need to consider ourselves as well. We're considering the players a lot in this presentation. I think it's hugely important that we consider ourselves and how resilient are we as coaches and as individuals, and how will that reflect on the players. I think that's a huge area. And again, we might look a little bit deeper in that as we go through the presentation, but I think it's hugely important. Obviously enough, as adults, we're going to have an influence over the kids at under 13, under 14, under 15, maybe not so much as we get through to a minor and adult. It's a different game you're playing at that stage, and you perhaps need to carry yourself and coach in a different way, but it's definitely hugely important. At that age, it's not acceptable for a player to refuse instruction. Yeah, again, you'd like to think, I suppose, that as the younger the players are, that they will move into the positions that they're told to do so. And then again, it's very important. I think Donie mentioned it there, I suppose, that what's important for the team overall. You know, so is it a case that in order to thinking down the road for the individual and for the team, so is taking the young player off in that particular scenario, leading down the road as he moves into the working environment and into real life, ultimately, when he's going to become more aware that if he's asked to do something at work and he doesn't do it, well, then there'll be a lot more worse consequences, perhaps, than just being taken off the field at under 14. So, yeah, definitely. Okay. Okay, thank you all very much for that. We have one more scenario again, just to get us all thinking. Yeah, the point should be pointed out during a team talk. Okay, yeah, definitely. And I think that leads us even, I think, into the next scenario here where Donie will be discussing, I suppose, around the team and how things should be addressed at particular stages of the year and so on. So over to you again, Donie. So just to call out the next one.
Yeah, so again, we can turn on our mics if we want to reply, or maybe this has happened to you in a scenario, and maybe if you dealt with it well or you felt you dealt with it well, you might talk about it, your instance, because I think this could have happened to a lot of people maybe on here. But your star player at under 16 has an attendance record of 25% at training. First round of the championship on Saturday. What do you as the manager do? So if you want, turn on the mic if you had experience of that and talk, or you want to again put into the comment box. We'll give another minute to do that.
Okay, thank you all very much again, folks. Comments coming through here. So don't start him, but explain to him beforehand the reason. Yeah, I think that's something that Donie is going to addressed there, I suppose, again, is the explanation of things and the clarity around things and how important that is, be it under 16, under 13 at adults. That the player doesn't start the game, that the attendance record is too low. Yeah. Okay. Assuming the importance of the attendance has been made clear to all players, and unless valid reasons, then he can start. Good point there. A lot of comments coming through now. Sorry that they're getting away from it. Thank you all very much for that. So I'm just going to read out two more, and perhaps I'll call it over to Donie and just come back to some more then at the end. But again, thank you very much for the response. Okay, depends on the reason for non-attendance. If it's purely non-commitment, he starts as a sub. Leave him off. 25% attendance not good enough, even if it's good reason. It's better not to start him. However, you should speak to him beforehand and explain the reasons. This also shows your commitment to the team. Okay, and perhaps I just scroll down, just pick one more if that's okay for now. Don't start him. Explain the reason. Can be used in impact sub. Okay. Yeah, okay, and thank you all very, very much for that. I'll come back to some more. But for now, we'll just pass it over to Donie just for his thoughts. Okay, Donie, thank you.
And again, purely down to the coach's decision as well. Again, there's no right and wrong here. There's a lot of feedback on this. And look, I suppose at that age group as well, it's hard to hold on to players, especially at that age. And your main job at under 16 is to carry all these players right through to minor to play adult football for your club. And the one thing I'd say on building resilience, and it's been said here already about the coach, I think the coach's respect and the coach's word is huge. So at the start of the year, if you say, make a big issue about attendance, if you're not here all the time, you won't play, but you definitely have to stick to your word. But what you say is huge, no matter when you talk to the players. Because if you lose their respect, they're gone from you. And the way you lose your respect is if you don't keep your word. It's very important, no matter what you say, first and foremost, to stick to your guns. Again, there's been a lot of good answers there. I would have to, it's very hard to say 25% of the training, we have to know all of our players. And what's the reason behind this player? Do I know where this player is? Is he playing maybe elite soccer for Shamrock Rovers? Is he just down the town? Is he playing on their PlayStation? So if you know his circumstances and his circumstances is genuine, and you keep the players in the loop on where this guy is and what he's doing, if the player is genuine, I probably play him. Now again, that's only my opinion. If he's down the town or if he's on the PlayStation, under no circumstances, and the other players knows where he is, under no circumstances would I play him. And again, like you'll have some players, the best players on the team will probably want him to play. The corner forwards or the corner backs who's worried about their position on the team probably won't want him to play. So it's very important that you keep a balance and a good ethos amongst the team as well, and make the decision best for the team. If you understand that there's a genuine reason, maybe we're talking to the guys know that this lad will be coming back or he's in the loop. If he's just simply ignoring training and you don't know where he is, I wouldn't play him anyway. If I know where he is and there's a genuine excuse and he's making constant contact with me and we're replaying it to the players, I would play him. Again, if he is in constant contact with you, I would play him. If he's not, we don't know where he is, and it's non-commitment, under no circumstances would I play him.
Okay, thank you, Donie. I think, I suppose, no matter what the scenario is, we've only outlined 2 scenarios there, and we could have outlined 102, and I'm sure you're aware of that yourself, no doubt. I think, I suppose, the reason, again, going back to the start of the conversation when I said it, that at the end of this, I'd like to pose more questions and answers, and that people are going away from this, I suppose, thinking about these different scenarios and what they might do, because we're dealing with people's emotions, we're dealing with people's conditioning, their mental conditioning from where they come and their environment. So every scenario is different, everybody is different, and we need, I suppose, yes, no doubt, to be able to deal with everything on an individual basis. But at the end of the day, I suppose we also need to be considering what's going to be the aftermath, or what's going to be the medium or long-term impact for this particular group or for this particular person if I make this move. So alone, just considering about what's going to happen on that first round of the championship on that given Saturday, but what's the influence going to be like on the players that are going to be there the next Saturday, the Saturday after, and then in turn that individual. And even looking down the road, I suppose, as we talk about developing player pathways within clubs and everything else, what's the club's stance on things? So have the club had a conversation even about, I suppose, what's going to be the scenario if this particular player is not able to play, or this player is only attending 25% of the training sessions? What's the club stance on the whole thing? So even again, we spoke about the coaching officer, we spoke about the coaching committee. So maybe even as that group, again, another thing to add to the list in terms of considerations that need to be had around the players. So it's again just to highlight the point, I suppose, that we're dealing with emotions and we're dealing with that conditioning that's within people, which is very, very difficult just to hone in or to put it into a particular box. And then in turn, what's the medium and what's the long-term impact going to be of my decision for this particular Saturday? And that can be so varied and it can be so vast. I'm just going to read out one or two more of the comments there, please, just before we move on. The player could be working at home and may find it difficult to get to training on time. Each situation is different, no doubt it is. So it may not be the player's fault, it may not. Okay, it may not. The team is the priority and commitment to his teammates is important. He starts on the bench. Okay, thank you very much. So I'm just going to read out one more, please, and we're going to move on. So it depends on why his attendance is 25%. Has it been explained to the panel? Is it due to county commitments? If no agreement with the coach, he doesn't play before committed players. So yeah, it's been find out what is going on. And again, even going back to that particular scenario that I spoke about, where those 12, 15 years ago, when I started off training first or coaching teams first, again, I was taking all gym fellas home after training from around the parish, but that would not happen now. So how can we find ways of really finding out what's going on with these young people, or even these adults, and that's a challenge ultimately for a coach, is to try and find out what is actually going on with these people that I'm working with. Okay, so thank you all very, very much for the comments there. That's excellent response. Thank you very much, and we move on to the next one, please, Jason. Okay, Donie.
Yeah, so I suppose this is the famous Johan Cruyff. I let all you teams play the same way, like the first team. I always put the emphasis on learning. Sometimes I had the suspicion youth coaches were more concerned with winning. They cared about their own reputation. I cared only about the interest of the club. When a player with talent couldn't defend, I put him in defence so he could learn. But that could cost us a pint. But I didn't care. I was busy developing the player. So while we're also very mindful of developing the skills, developing resilience there hugely as well. Like if we push our free taker in defence, how would he react? You know, would he give it the same commitment? That's basically what he done there. He couldn't defend, he put players in there to build resilience, build a team resilience as well. Would players give out if the striker went centre half? You know, what way did they react? What way did the team go? And again, the coach must encourage resilience and playing like that. And again, the coach has to be mindful of developing the team, develop the player. And don't be worrying about just winning the game. Okay?
Okay, so Jason, next one, please. Jason gone on strike.
He's back.
He's back. A short strike. Thank you, Jason. So the next thing then, I suppose, like, how can the coaches build resilience? I think it's just going back to one of the points there, I suppose, that was made about the coach and how the coach behaves and how the coach perceives things. I think it's hugely important. I think experience is hugely important. I think being involved with teams and as the years go on, and when you can look back and reflect, I suppose, on different scenarios, you can potentially say, I suppose, that yes, in this particular scenario, I made this decision at the time and it seemed to work for me. In other scenarios, you could say, I made this decision, it didn't go as well as I'd hoped or as anticipated, but when the next scenario comes up, then you're in a position to make a more educated decision. From my own point of view, and just speaking, I suppose, about a few of the adult teams that I would have been involved with at home, I managed my own club, first of all, and we were pushing and trying to get promoted out of Division 5, and it was a kind of an eternal struggle there for a while. It wasn't happening for us, but when I came in and I took over as the manager, I was able to bring, I suppose, the knowledge and the bit of know-how that I would have gathered from my time in IT Carlow and put that into play, and was able to give the players a structure that they bought into. Now, as the year went on, early doors, lost the first game, we went on a run then of maybe winning 12 games on the bounce. Everything seemed to be going well, and all the players were happy. Then a few injuries came into play, and a few fellas went away, and things started to slacken off. And there was one particular game I remember that we had to win the game and would have got promoted, but the game ended in a draw, and that was that ultimately. So that group of players, I saw over the course of a couple of weeks, ultimately, I suppose, or a couple of months, that the highs that them players were on from winning games that they weren't used to winning. And then basically with the flick of a switch, you could say, over the course of maybe 1 or 2 games, how that completely changed and their mindset changed and they went backwards again. Even in terms of their attitude towards training and even turning up for training, it changed. So it's such a fickle business that as the coach, I think we need to be clear on what our principles are. We need to be clear, I suppose, in terms of what we want as a coach and what we want to achieve by the end of the season, and maybe not base it on around results and that results are the be on end all, because ultimately they're not, I don't think. A lot of factors can come into play that will determine that you don't get the results. But leading on from that, then I got the opportunity a couple of years later to manage Anthony Maher's club, Laois, and they were in the same position in that. And I remember they lost the first 3 games of the competition, and it said at home that if you lose 2 games, that's it, you won't get promoted. But I was able to kind of recognise that there was something within the group, despite the fact that they lost 3 games, that I was able to use the right words from my experiences in terms of trying to build the resilience within a relatively young team to basically to allow them to be comfortable enough in the fact and the knowledge that they were good enough to get the results, and that they were dogged enough and that they were determined enough. And I could see that from their training, and basically I was able to just impose those ideas onto the players, and they bought into it and they went from there. There's no doubt, I suppose, that it wasn't easy either, but I definitely think, I suppose, that my experiences from my own club and seeing things go so well and falling down and going not so well within a very, very short period of time made me even more resilient as a coach. That when that second team I was involved with, they lost the first 3 games, that they were able to respond, and I had, I suppose, the experience and perhaps the know-how in terms of where to get the team to and how they needed to perform and where their heads needed to be at. And eventually they did get promoted that year. So experience is hugely important. Get as much experience as you possibly can, I would say. And it's only when you can reflect in, ultimately, I suppose, when you can reflect on particular things that it leads to better experiences for you as a coach and ultimately then for your players. So how do we prove this through our coaching? I think the Torres principles are sound and solid. A lot of you will be familiar with those Torres principles now from attending workshops and from hearing us speaking at different events, be it at a club level or a county level. And Donie would have gone through them at the start. The whole idea, I suppose, of testing and the challenging in players in particular is a big one when you're looking at building resilience. So how can we test and how can we tweak what we do and how can we challenge the players on an ongoing basis as a coach? It comes down ultimately again at that stage, I suppose, to getting as much coaching experience as you can, both practically and theoretically, with the different courses that go on and attending different events and linking in and speaking to other coaches who have gone through the same experience. So we can definitely improve our players by our experiences, by our knowledge, and by our passions and our desires to get a particular point across. When we're looking, I suppose, we have to be, I suppose, the whole idea of how we coach. Torres principles, like I said at the start, are sound in their foundations, and I think if any coach was to pick up on those and to focus on those as we move into the next phase of training and games, whenever that will be for us, that if you did, I think they would allow everybody to develop as coaches and to have a particular focus and to be in a position where we can help to build resilience within the players by imposing those principles that Torres teaches. What do we coach in? So if you go back, I suppose, to the little diagram that I was showed earlier when we were looking at the player profiling and trying to figure out how resilient this player actually is in my head and in their head. In implementing, I suppose, both on an individual level and in terms of a collective level, replicating what you need to do in training, not just having training sessions for the sake, but really having a focus about your training session and having a purpose and an idea of what you want to achieve at the end of the session. I think, again, that will help to build the resilience in the players. If your players, for argument's sake, are finding it hard to keep possession of the ball, maybe then you need to create a scenario in training where it's really, really intense and the whistle isn't blown too many times, perhaps at older levels I'm talking about here. Or create an environment where the players are under pressure and they can build resilience within your own training session. And that comes in from the game-based the coaching. Okay, so the coach is hugely important in this, and the coach has such a huge influence over the kids at underage level and no doubt as well at adult level. If adults see, I suppose, that a coach is performing and doing his very, very best, I suppose, to prepare the sessions and to carry out the sessions, then the players generally do respond until a particular time comes, no doubt. So, at underage level, I think it's hugely important that we set a particular example in terms of the language that we use and how we speak and how we carry ourselves and going without saying in terms of how we prepare and how organised we are on the ground. Again, all of those particular things will allow those players to see that, yes, this person means business, and in turn, it'll reflect back onto the players and it'll help those players to be more resilient as they play games and everything else. There's always going to be challenges, and again, we'll discuss that a little bit further as we move into the presentation in terms of what those challenges could be and perhaps how we could look to address them. Okay, so Jason. Okay, so you can allow the whole slide there, so to drop down, please. So in this particular instance here, I'd just like to speak to you, I suppose, about a term, reframing. So what is reframing? And I might just read out what it says here in front of us. So this is the purpose of changing the way you view a situation. Instead of using a loss as a failure, use it as a learning experience. So again, not a particularly easy thing to do, perhaps a little bit easier maybe at underage level where you can have more influence over the kids and you can create a scenario where if look, we all know that every club get their turn, and within that every club are going to have teams that are going to be strong and other teams in there mightn't be as strong. So everybody gets their turn in that regard. And as a coach, if it happens, I suppose, that you're dealing with a situation where you're dealing with that team that mightn't be as strong as what's gone before them, well then the responsibility perhaps is even greater on you to create an environment that the players can be resilient in. And it needs to be a positive environment in that regard, that if things aren't going as well as you particularly like them to go, and if you are losing matches, then you have to try and portray it as being a learning experience for the players and keep telling the players that they will get better and they will improve if they stick at it, which ultimately they will. And at the end of the day, what are we looking to do? We're looking to try and encourage as many of those people and those young players to stay playing the game and to stay with our club up to including adult level. So use it as a valuable opportunity to learn from the performance and even view how the winner performed. What did they do better than us? So again, in that particular example, I suppose, maybe not so much under 13, under 15, but again at minor and especially at adult level, why not reflect a lot of games at that level now are videoed? Why not reflect, I suppose, on what happened during the game and what the opposition done? And I suppose not to leave our egos take over in terms of, where they beat us, but look, I'm just going to brush that aside now and we'll be better the next day. And yet, perhaps leave the ego, take the second belt by watching the game back over again and trying to learn from what the other team did well. Again, we all have to learn from each other, and that's the only way that we can. I think the next point is important, even though it sounds simple enough. So you can imagine, I suppose, after a game and the coaches will be talking amongst themselves, again, be it under 13, under 15 level and all the ways through, they'll be talking, such and such didn't play that well today. Why didn't he play that well today? I don't know. And let's see that potentially, and I even know myself from conversations that'd be the first thing is, why didn't he play that well today? So maybe the conversation could potentially change, I suppose, and it can be, how can I improve the next time, or how can that player improve the next time? So even by having that particular conversation within your own coaching group, be it at half time or even directly after the game as you're walking off the pitch. Maybe even just a change in the words in our conversation from why didn't he perform how we expected to, how can he improve the next time. That might even change the conversation that happens in the dressing room after the game, and change the whole dynamic and the experience that the players could have. So you could go in there after perhaps the game not going so well for you and say, okay, well look lads, look, today went how it went, and the next day we can improve here and we can improve there. Rather than put, why did we do this, and why did you poke the ball over here, and why didn't you take the opportunity to score that goal, and why didn't we score that penalty when we got it? Maybe just move on and always look to the future in terms of how can it improve next. Okay, so Jason, the next one, please. Okay, so I think this is hugely important for me, and this is something that even before, I suppose, I became aware of the theory. It's something that I would have always tried to impose on different teams that I was coaching and managing. I think what you can control and what you can influence versus what you can't control is so important as a coach and more importantly as a player. So what can we control? And I suppose it'd be easy enough for us to figure that out. Again, let's look at it from the player's perspective here right now. What can the player control? They can definitely control their work ethic, they can control their body language, and they can control being coachable. So they can control how they carry themselves when they come to training and how they behave. Can we have influence over the referee? Can we have influence over our teammates and the opposition? Yes, we can. You'll be encouraging, I suppose, that like you'd always like to think, I suppose, with the referee, that you can maybe have a conversation with the referee and be nice to the referee in order to maybe get no break later on in the day. Again, how the coach perceives the referee and the conversation that's had about the referee. Oh, this is your man's after landing on, so-and-so's after landing on to referee the match tonight, he's a disaster. And again, if the players are left listening to that, then the referee is a disaster. So maybe again, just changing the language and changing how we frame things, to being a positive all the time, and encouraging the youngsters in particular that if they are to have a conversation with the referee, that it's again that they're mannerly and that they behave themselves and make sure that they're not being disrespectful. The same goes to teammates and the same goes to the opposition. We can influence the opposition by no doubt, I suppose, by playing harder than they do, by wanting the game more. Donie would have spoken about that a bit earlier about commitment, and that's definitely an influence over the opposition by stamping how you want to play the game on them. We definitely don't have no control over the weather. We definitely have no control over the people in the stand. I think what's an important one, I suppose, is that whole idea that to make the players realize, I suppose, especially again at a younger level, and even at a level, I have experience of one player in particular down through the years, and the majority, 99% of the players that have come across have been A1, but and this was at a level, and the team ultimately wasn't very strong. That's the reality about it. He's a decent player, decent player, but again, would continuously, I suppose, look to others rather than looking at himself. And as much as I tried and had the conversations, and again tried to build, I suppose, resilience in him, to say that it's okay to look at yourself and it's okay to reflect on your own performance without jumping down the throat of others. It was a very hard task to achieve, to be quite honest. So I think that's hugely important, that to make the young players aware that the rest of the players are doing their very best, and that they have no influence over how the other players are going to perform on a given day. That everyone's there to do their best. And again, and I'm sure it's something that we all do, I suppose, don't we, as coaches, that look, lads, we don't fight amongst ourselves. We always say that, don't we? And I think how we say that and how we get that message across is hugely important, and building positive resilience within the group that are going to stick together no matter what. Because if the players, no matter what age they are at each other's throats or giving out to each other, well, then the whole idea of resilience and team bonding and spirit and commitment, it won't be long drifting out the window. Okay, Jason, you might just put up the next piece, please. Next piece.
Yeah, Mike, I think a question there from Paul.
Okay, very good. We can't control the weather, but we can build our ability to keep playing through poor conditions. Yeah, 100%. I remember going back to it was a minor championship final behind in Ballybunnin, and we were playing Knockbroston, I think it was, and you might be aware of the man. He's there in our own club, Mick Finuke, and he would have played for Kerry, and he would have been heavily involved in boxing then after, and don't know, you just remember a few things, but the hailstones came down. You can belly button now, like in the Atlantic Bates in there, the hailstones, everything came down, whatever it was in early December, and he came into the dressing room at half time, and it's just, I remember, I suppose, again, he wouldn't have been in our dressing room other than that on any other occasion, but keep your chest up now, lads, and don't bow your head to that rain, you know. So, like, it was very, very simple, but I think it was profound in terms of just, it captured a particular moment, I suppose, where like the rain and the hailstones were so bad and the wind was so bad, but they were the couple of words that he used, and they might have sounded so simple and maybe a little bit archaic, I suppose, if you want, to a certain degree, but I think they were very, very profound, and I know that it stuck in my head as I went out into the second half that okay, look, that's no doubt the weather is what it is, but we can still control, like Paul would have said there, I suppose, our ability to play through it. So 100%. And again, as a coach or as an influencer, as that man was on that particular day, it's hugely, hugely important, I suppose, to get the point across. So definitely, Paul, 100%. I agree with that. Control the controllables. Control the controllables. Okay. Make the players realise that there are things that they have 100% control over. There are things that they can influence, and that there are other things that they have no control over. Okay, and then to spend their time and energy dealing with those things that they have control and influence over. I think that's so important, and I think in order to even build resilience within a young person as they go forward into life, it's ultimately we want to do as coaches, not alone within the game, but to try and influence those young people the best we can as they move forward into life, and give them as much experience as we possibly can to deal with the things that you can control. Okay, I think that's hugely, hugely important. Okay, Jason. Okay, so I just better turn on the light here.
You can put up the whole slide there, Jason.
Okay.
Is that coming up now, lads? Yeah.
Not yet, Jason. No, just the first point only. Okay, so you might just, while that's appearing there, Donie, you might just continue with the conversation that was had around that slide. There it is. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So look at modelling a resilient behaviour. A player who is successful is used as a model for your players to learn from. I suppose just what we mean by successful, like only one team can win the championship. So, like if we're looking at the All Ireland in Dublin and won the last 5 in a row, does that mean that other players and other teams aren't successful? No, it doesn't. If we were to look at our own senior championship, Portlaoise have won a lot over the last number of years. Does that mean other players and other teams aren't successful? No, it doesn't. Successful player to me would be somebody who is consistently playing at their optimum level, and who is very resilient. So we tell our players who to look out for, how to resemble them, and how are they showing resilience. I suppose definitely in our own county, to me, John O'Loughlin would be hugely resilient, as he's come back after not a lot of success throughout his career, maybe come back and won a Division 4 and now playing in Division 2, but definitely very resilient, very committed. He's open to change. He's after playing under a lot of managers, and he still keeps coming back and back and back for more, and he gives absolutely everything. Modelling is about replicating the thought patterns, actions and emotions of successful players. I suppose the big player there that I'd be talking about definitely would be Mark Timmins from Grey Cullen. Just his emotions and his thought patterns. Like, I'd say I never seen him actually losing the head. He always is calm and cool and collective. And it's just his emotions. Like he no matter what stage of the game it is, no matter what's going on, if they're 5 points down or 5 points up, he just keeps playing to take the game the way it should be. keeps calm, keeps cool, no matter what situation arises. He always has the same thing. And maybe he might be feeling the emotions, but he definitely doesn't show off anyway. Ask the question to your team: who's your favorite player, and what does he do that makes him so good? And get them to emulate their favorite player and copy their favorite player. I know when I was younger, I suppose I would always looked up to Beano in my own club and county and tried to copy some of the things that he was doing on the field just by purely watching him. So he'd get the ball, he'd be dummy solo, and everybody would be looking to do that, and that's who I would be looked up to. I suppose you're making your players more resilient because they're copying and emulating successful players. Another way, I think it was 2005 or 6, he had a serious leg break, and he came back to play for elite seniors and at an elite level. So he showed huge resilience as well to come back. So all the time asking your players, who's your favourite player? Copy them. What do they do? Show me some of the things they do. And you'll improve your players that way and also getting them to be more resilient. Okay, Jason? Yeah, I suppose, again, resilient players attribute their success to those elements they can control or influence. Therefore, success is not somebody else's responsibility. The same is for any poor performance. I suppose just to say myself there, anytime we probably would have went to O'Moore Park and lost, I suppose I would have myself personally come out maybe blaming somebody else, or it wasn't my fault again, So I definitely needed to be more resilient. Players should be encouraged to be the best they can be, not looking to blame anyone else for poor performances. And again, you'll be huge, especially with the younger players, to make them more resilient, to make them show that during their training sessions. And even talk to them about that is huge. And not just about developing their skills, but also developing resilience as well at different levels along the way of their pathway. The coaches have a huge job in guiding all these players through their development and trying to instill resilience and to deal with setbacks would be huge. Okay, Jason? Yeah, so again, quick read through them. Players who are exceptionally technical and physically competent are more resilient to setbacks in their performance. When a player has experienced a poor performance, those who have high level skills realize recreating a successful result is not about reinventing the whole process. Instead, technically competent athletes know all they have to do is recall the times when they had previous success and go back to the basics of their technique which delivered this initial success. This helps them rebound faster than if the athlete has a poorer level of skill. And I suppose the big thing there, resilient-wise, is confidence as well. That the player goes back and is confident, and it's about the coach again, all the time through the pathway. How resilient players might be in training and how they prepare in championships. It could be different. I suppose why they didn't have a high level of skill level. Ask the player. The coach should talk to the player all the time and know them and give them solutions as well. Maybe if you've done this better, maybe if you've done this, maybe if you're prepared like this. All the time, the coach talking and dealing with them and giving them solutions. Okay?
Yeah, I just one quick point to that, and again, we've about 5 minutes left, folks. So thank you for staying with us. So just one quick point on that, and Donie alluded to it there. But players who are exceptionally technically and physically competent. Okay, so I think that starts at the very early stages at nursery level, through your goal games and all the way through your underage structure. Okay, I think it's not going to be a situation, I suppose, where you arrive at adult level and you're going to have a player who's exceptional or whatever. It needs to be a process. I think that's why it's so important, perhaps, that we do have player pathways within our clubs, that we do, as the weeks go on now, and I'd encourage every club to engage with that first step in the process of joining us to do a club tourist workshop on that particular topic. And we'd encourage people to talk about, I suppose, what's going to happen from 7 to 9 to 11 in terms of what was carried on at the coaching level. So what skills were done, what games did we play, what were we trying to achieve, both physically, psychologically, and technically. But then I suppose at the same time, perhaps there might need to be a conversation around how resilient are this particular group that you are passing on from 7 to 9 to 11 to 13. And you say resilience at 7 and 9, well, yes, there's a psychological element, I suppose, involved at that particular age group as well, that we would see there on those tourist cards that I hope the majority of people would have and that would be aware of at this stage. So it's an ongoing process. You're not going to just arrive at a given day that you're going to have Henry Shefflin or you're going to have whoever it may be that's playing at the top level. So it needs to be a continuous process. And I think that's hugely, hugely important that everybody has responsibility in that, from the nursery coach to 7 and 9 and all the way through the system, and getting that system in place and having those conversations, yes, about coaching, yes, about the physical element of things, but also perhaps about the psychological, ultimately, which resilience falls under. Okay, Jason? Okay, so time is moving on, and again, I'm just conscious of that now, folks, as well. And this is perhaps something for you to consider yourself. I was going to put it out there to the group, but at this stage, I'm going to move on to the next slide. So I'm just going to put it. It's again a bit of food for thought, perhaps for somebody out there, perhaps for everybody. So the club team have won under 12, 14, and 16 in minor championships at their ease. None made a step up to adult football. In hindsight, what would we have done differently? So I'm not going to look for people to post at this stage, but perhaps have the conversation in your own head. Perhaps if that happened to me, if it was to happen to me, if it did happen to my club, and it's something that I'm aware of, what could we have done differently? Again, it's all about development. Okay, it's all about getting all the players through from under 12 to under 14 to 16 and so on. Okay, ultimately that's what it's all about within the clubs. If a little bit of success comes along with it, then great. If that happens to be the case, that's fine. But ultimately, I suppose what we end up talking with there is the whole idea, I suppose, around that probably the same group of players always got to play. They got very familiar with winning. Winning became easy. There was no challenge there. When they did become adults and they moved up to that grade and the game became tougher and it became stronger and they needed to be more physical, perhaps they didn't put in the work because perhaps the team was just so far ahead of the other teams. And again, that comes back to clubs getting their turn. But it's your turn and everyone gets it. Work harder. Work harder on your player pathway. Work harder in terms of what's going on underneath that good group coming through. It's not the time to ease off. It's the time to try and capitalise and maintain a strong adult club going down the road. So if you do have a good group of youngsters, a good young team, work harder, I would say. Okay, so Jason. So I'm just going to touch on this, okay, and I call it here easier times and tougher times, okay? Ultimately, what you could call it, I suppose, you could call it the times that you win and the times that you lose. And from my experiences, that particular line that exists between winning and losing or being successful and what we perceive not to be successful or easier times and tougher times is a really, really, really thin line. Again, I give my own example there of that team that I had at home, 12 games in a row, a few little things start to happen, lose a game and it starts to fall off. Okay, so it can happen in a very, very short period of time. So during those times, perhaps when the times are a little bit easier for you as a coach, you can't just rest on your laurels. You can't just rest and say, oh yeah, look, the team are playing well, they're training well, they're winning their few games. Be conscious of player rotation. Be conscious, I suppose, that you need to try and engage with stronger opposition, okay, to get them the games that they need. Challenge the players in a different age groups. If you've got a really good group, maybe of under 13s, perhaps they need a few games at under 15 level to see how they're getting on, and working then as a club that they won't be overplayed and that they won't be played every night of the week. Identify the weaknesses and concentrate on improvement in those areas. So perhaps at a 13 level, at 15 level, you might look at a group context like we spoke about earlier when we looked at those frameworks and platforms that we could potentially use. And if this is a scenario for you, perhaps at minor level or at adult level, and that you were winning your games and your team were just too strong for the league or the championship that they were in, okay, you need to try and test and challenge those players all the time. And the players need to be taken out of their comfort zone in those particular scenarios. So you can ultimately plan to try and do that in training and by getting stronger opposition, perhaps in challenge games. Then when the times are a little bit tougher and them times come through and it's about being resilient, I think as a coach and as a person to try and impose that resilience onto other people, then you must feel it yourself. You must. And I suppose one point that I forgot to make when I was just giving that little story about what happened at home, my own club, and then moving on to other club and having a bit of experience to carry on through that little promotion push, was that I suppose that I was aware in my own mind and I was comfortable in my own mind about what exactly I was telling them. And I believed myself. If I didn't believe, then they would have picked up on that. People are very intuitive, and if I didn't believe in what I was saying and telling them at that stage, then there's no way that they would have gone along with me. So during those tougher times, and as well, it's been the whole idea of realistic goal setting. Okay, it's very, very important, especially I suppose there wouldn't be a whole pile of goal setting going on at the underage levels, again at minor perhaps at a level. Being realistic about what you can achieve. And if everybody sets out goals now, I suppose at the start of the year, is there anything wrong if things don't go how you perceive them or how things you want them to go? Is there anything wrong with putting a pause button there and going back to the group again and resetting the goals perhaps? I don't think there is. I think it's probably worse if you're continue on with the same goals and not address it at all. We want to do this, we want to do that. After 2 or 3 months of the season, 2 of them 3 are not going to happen for you. Rather than just leave it linger, I perhaps would go back and again, how can we make these players resilient to what's going on? How can we make them continue? Be selective in the challenge opposition. Maybe you need an easier game. Continually develop and monitor the players' attributes. Okay, and that comes back perhaps the planning and framework that we looked at. Identify the improvements and share them with the players. Okay, so that's very, very important that we have positivity in terms of what we're doing in our training sessions, even during games. So the person that's doing the stats reported back to me today that we only had 3 wides in the first half rather than having 10 wides, whatever the scenario may be, whatever it may be. Okay, so Jason. Okay, so done it. Last couple of minutes so.
Yeah, so we're just at an end there now, and again, thanks everybody for staying tuned in. So look at, I suppose, the rocky road to success. What people think it is just going from one place to the next. It's definitely not like that. So I suppose from my own experience as well, when I was younger, definitely we were winning all around and we're getting easy on the pitch and we could do what we liked at even inter-county level, you know. And then maybe when the stumbling blocks came in, I personally myself probably didn't have the resilience I needed to get over the rocky road when we hit a bump in the road and maybe looking to blame others or, you know, it wasn't my fault. But actually what the rocky road really looks like is you'll have success, you'll have a stumbling block, you'll go again, and it's all the time about it, you know, that you need to be able to respond when you hit the bumps in the road. You know, you're going to have good times. You're going to have a park where everyone wants to be. It'll be playing hurling in football. That's where you want to be when you're playing with a club team in Laois. You want to be able to go and perform and show your resilience. It's in O'Moore Park. Okay, just moving on there, Jason.
Just very briefly there. So just a question or comment, no doubt, I suppose, even maybe if a team wins all round them with underage, yet no player makes a step up to adult, does that mean the coaches have succeeded or failed? I would say failed. I would say failed because you get teams and you get every, like I've mentioned a couple of times now, but clubs get their turn and a group of players come through that are going to win no matter whether they had a coach or not, ultimately. You just probably have a group of players that are good at that level, they're potentially better than what's in the rest of the county or within the rest of their area. So I would say, and I would, a quick word, failed, I would think. If they don't go through to play, even whether it be at junior level or be at senior level, I would think that if the players, if the coaches don't bring them players through, then I think that's a failure, straight out. I think it is.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Like, ultimately, if you have very talented players, and if none of them are able to play adult football, there's something seriously wrong. Okay, so the Rockery Road, we'll just give a couple of examples there of, I suppose early on, these guys weren't really bloomers as such. Henry Shefflin never played underage for Kilkenny. He turned out to be the greatest hurler, I suppose, of all time in a lot of people's opinion. Same goes for Ray Keane, probably the best Irish soccer player ever. Was told he was too small and he wasn't good enough when he was younger. And I suppose from a football context, his picture's not there now, but up in Monaghan, Kieran McManus is probably one of the leading forwards in the country and has been for the last 7 or 8 years. He never played underage for Monaghan, and Monaghan wouldn't be a big county. So definitely it does be ups and downs on your road. So it's how you respond to the downs is most important, and how you can coach and how you can instill resilience in your players will determine where they end up when they leave minor level. Okay, Jason?
So there's a little video, and I'm just going to put this little video on just when we finish. And again, if you'd like to stay and watch it, please feel free to do so. And Jason and myself are just going to have to share and unshare. But for now, please, Jason, just go to the next slide if you wouldn't mind. And I'm going to share that at the very, very end, and if people would like to stay and watch it. So again, folks, I'd like to thank you all for tuning in. There's a fair bit of information there. It took us just close on the hour and a half to get through it, okay? But again, thank you for tuning in tonight, and I hope that everybody tunes in again tomorrow night. So just to conclude, emphasize appropriate development, not early success. Build a strong base through deliberate preparation. The club pathways that's available now, as opposed to all the clubs, just to reach out to your GDAs, and we'll start putting the processes in place. They're in place in a lot of clubs already. A lot of clubs are way down the road. So whatever stage you're at, please make contact again, and let's develop that further. The whole idea of developing the fundamental skills, developing our players both physically and mentally, again, relating back to what the tourist is telling us and what that player pathway is telling us. And again, for those people that have been at the different events and refer back to those cards and study those cards, there's a lot of information in there. Okay, and strive to develop adaptable players and adaptable people, I suppose, no doubt. What will the challenges be? The challenges, I suppose, potentially could be that there be a narrow skill base in a sport and a personal context. So a narrow base in terms of them perhaps maybe only playing one sport could be a narrow perspective on things. Maybe the opportunity should be there for the kids to play more sports so they can get a better balance of what's going on. Hopefully, we want them to come back playing J8 into the day when they do become an approach adulthood. Okay, and in a personal context, we would have touched on those as well, I suppose, around how important the coach is in terms of the personal development of all these young players and not so young players that are under our umbrella and under our wing. They're a huge influence that we can have. Okay, and again, the whole idea, I suppose, in it, the win of an all-cost culture, and it definitely comes down to, just to reiterate the last point, the whole idea of development before success. Development before success. Okay, so if there's any further conversations that you'd like to have, please pick up the phone and ring either Donie or myself, or ring Jason and Peter. They'll also be familiar and aware of what was on this particular presentation, and they're available to talk to anybody that would like to speak further about this. I would like to thank everybody again for joining in tonight. I'd like to thank Donie for his work and the preparation that Donie put in to getting this ready tonight. I hope you'll all join us again tomorrow night for part 2 of Jason and Peter when they speak about conditioning the GA player. There was an excellent turnout last night. I know the response to that particular event was very, very positive. So I hope that everybody again is available to tune in and to join us as the lads discuss that. I'm now just going to pop up a little video, okay? And again, if you'd like to stay tuned in and watch that video as the time comes there to wind off, okay? So thank you all very, very much again, folks, and I hope to see you all again tomorrow evening. You'll receive the link and you'll receive the invite without any bother, hopefully, tomorrow afternoon. So again, thank you all very, very much. You might just, Donie, you might just confirm with me there. You can hear. Can you hear that, Donie?
No, it's not playing yet, Mike.
Okay. No, it's up there. Apologies now, folks. I know there was a button that I didn't press. I should have thought of that. Now, Donie?
Yeah. That's finished there now, Mike. You can.
That's finished there now, yeah. So again, thank you all very, very much, folks, and we'll see you all again tomorrow evening. Mm-hmm.